Ladies, young ladies, and gentlemen, good morning to all or good evening. You are once again welcome here on your platform. Much loved the platform for awakening consciousness. So, this is the headline of international news. From the Kursk region, President Vladimir Putin addresses the French president and the French people directly. You are well aware of this. Yesterday, March 12, 2025, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, traveled to the people of Kursk for the very first time. To the Kursk region for the very first time. And when we talk about the Kursk region, you already know what it's about. It's this region, this part of Russia that experienced the penetration of elements of the armed forces of Ukraine and NATO. They penetrated with the hope of ensuring that Ukraine could have a position of strength in future negotiations. So, Vladimir Putin went there. He made several statements. He gave firm instructions regarding how to complete the cleanup in the region as quickly as possible. But he took the opportunity to send a very strong message to Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron, who in recent weeks, has strived to transform himself into a war leader. Emmanuel Macron, who decided to rally all of Europe against the Russian Federation. Emmanuel Macron, who has repeatedly made statements to present Russia as being a very urgent threat that weighs on both France and all of Europe. And moreover, due to the fact that Russia is a threat presented by France, Emmanuel Macron, on March 11, 2025, convened an emergency meeting in Paris. And this emergency meeting brought together all the chiefs of staff of NATO armies to define a strategic plan to face Vladimir Putin's Russia. That was just a little reminder. So, President Vladimir Putin, from the Kursk region, sent a clear message. And in his message, he made it clear that Russia has never interrupted the exchanges with the French side. Russia does not consider France as a threat and would not want to be considered a threat either. So, in his speech, Vladimir Putin made it clear to the world and to anyone who wants to listen that Russia is not the problem. That as Emmanuel Macron is presenting it, Russia is not, there you go, is not one. The threat may be elsewhere, but not Russia. So then, there's this. The Russian president, Vladimir Putin, will answer the phone. If the French leader, Emmanuel Macron, decides to call him, and here it's Putin himself who speaks, who will answer the phone. If Emmanuel Macron decides to call him, it's the least he can do. So, that means, instead of considering him a threat, he is not a threat. Russia is not a threat. If there is a problem that France thinks exists between France, Europe, and Russia, it's not just that Emmanuel Macron should pick up his phone and call Vladimir Putin. And Putin will pick up. So, here is a strong message to say that there is nothing between Russia and France. It is Emmanuel Macron who is dramatizing things. He is the one making people believe in something that doesn't exist. Because, to tell the truth, in the last 48 hours, let's say the last 4 to 5 days, Emmanuel Macron is on all fronts, on all television platforms, to present his project to fight against Russia. He presents, and he always did, as a real threat to Europe, and claims that the threat is even very urgent. So, then, we also have that the Russian ambassador in Paris, Alexis Michel, emphasized that Russia has not interrupted contacts with the French side. Yes, the Russian ambassador in France confirms? He says if President Macron decides to call his Russian counterpart, President Putin will answer that call. That means there is no problem. So, according to Vladimir Putin, Russia has never threatened France. Never. It is France itself that threatens itself, with its own statements, as we can see. So then, Vladimir Putin is very clear with Emmanuel Macron. It is France that is frightening itself. And that we can understand. We have Marine Le Pen, head of the French Rally Party, who has extensively revisited this to say that Emmanuel Macron is scaring his own citizens with his threat theory, as if Russia were a threat to France. But listen, Russia only reacts when it is provoked. Russia only reacts when it is provoked. Well, if you don't want the threat, why provoke Russia? We must leave Russia alone. So, President Vladimir Putin, then, he declares that Russia has no problem with France. All of Russia's problem is that Russia's interests are recognized and that these interests of Russia are taken into account. When we talk about these interests, we particularly mean not sending NATO soldiers to Russia's doorstep. Because when that happens, it means that peace, stability, and Russia's national security are threatened. It will be forced to react. And unfortunately, this is what Emmanuel Macron wants Europe to do. As long as Russia willingly agrees to sign a ceasefire agreement, voluntarily, Russia was not constrained. Why then decide to send NATO soldiers on the ground in Ukraine at Russia's border? It's the same thing. That's why Russia is fighting against Ukraine. It's the same thing in another form. Russia will never accept it. So, here is the message being sent to Emmanuel Macron. If he is smart, he will understand. If he doesn't understand, well, Russia will naturally react. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was the headline news. Thank you for sharing the video conference as much as possible. I will be back shortly. By the grace of God, the Almighty, with new updates. This was the voice of your one and only Samurai.